Thanks for being with us today here, Alice. And we're very much looking for, we know that it's late in Australia right now. What time is it over there?
It's not too bad, it's 8 p.m, but I do have a 3-year-old daughter who wakes up at 5, so it's a long day.
Okay, the work of a mom. It never ends.
That's right.
Okay. Do you have a presentation you want to share with us, or how would you like to proceed?
I thought I'd just introduce some of my work, and I've got a poem that I'd like to present, and I just thought I'd get and hopefully would have a discussion.
Okay, perfect.
Have I frozen?
No, you're good. You're good.
And,
you're good.
And just, do you mind letting me, how many people are there and what's going on in terms of the audience? How is this all working?
Well, we don't have a big audience. As we were commenting before, that due to COVID, most of the Documenta's activities have been canceled because it seems there's widespread. So streets are like empty, and the activities, most of the activities, all have been canceled, and until Friday, right? Until Friday. So we have a special situation here, but we prefer to keep going with these, doing it online and having the recording for the future. So we don't have a lot of people.
That's great.
Okay, would you like to go?
No, that's fine. That's cool. I was just checking the space.
Yeah. So welcome. Nice to see you again. Yeah, I think we should just start because time is precious for what you have to say.
Yes.
Perfect. So you can start if you would like to introduce yourself a little bit.
Yeah.
And then we will have this conversation.
Well, before I start, I'd like to acknowledge and pay respects to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, past, present, and emerging. I recognise that the sovereignty of the land that I'm on was never ceded, and it remains Aboriginal land. I am talking to you today from Darumbal country, which is in central Queensland, Australia. So, hello everybody. My name is Dr. Alys Mendus, and I was lucky enough to get a scholarship in freedom to learn to do a PhD, and I was searching for the ideal school around the world, and I've recently been able to write a book, I should show people can see, on searching for the ideal school around the world. And in this book I share the stories of my journey. So I use a research method called autoethnography, which is where you talk about yourself but you critique it within culture. So you're talking about, so I share the stories of all the schools I visited, but it's also a very personal reflection. So it's written it's filled with lots and lots of different images of different places I visited, plus my own artwork. I'm a printmaker, and even my 3-year-old has some work in here as well. So it's very much about a personal journey, about searching for this ideal school around the world. And I went to visit over 180 places in 23 different countries that were educating in some capacity differently to mainstream education. Sometimes it was a teacher in a classroom, or sometimes it was the whole school. I'm really interested in what was available within public funded schools, but there's an awful lot of independently funded schools, including lots of different pedagogies like Steiner Waldorf, Montessori, democratic, project-based learning. There are lots of the more alternatives that people know about already. And this little talk, I've had the focus on consciousness and thinking about a paradigm shift. So a lot of my work, even though I went to visit all these different schools, I did not find the ideal school. So I'm just going to read you a poem. It takes about 5 minutes, which sums up my work, because I use poetry all the way through my book and through my PhD research. So here we go. School is not the answer. I'm fed up with the system, current society, the lot that directs young people like cogs on a wheel. I've been there briefly. I worked as a teacher but retired at 27, fed up with the system. There must be another way. Doctorate scholarship and freedom to learn. Funded to travel and living in my van, I visited over 180 places, educating differently in 23 countries, searching for my ideal school. But where is it, you ask? Yeah, it doesn't exist. The ideal school is an oxymoron. I am fed up with the system, the expectations, the neoliberal machine. The future is not classrooms of children and young people of the same age, didactic teaching, state curriculums, indoctrination, where high stakes tests equal access and confirmation, rigid rules, homework instead of time to play, and uniforms. Don't get me started. Miss, is this on the test? No point in learning it otherwise. I roll my eyes at the system. You got it, fed up with that system. But what else is out there? I trained in Steiner Waldorf, forest schools, and led expeditions with teenagers in remote places around the world. Folks get excited when I talk about Steiner Waldorf, Montessori, and other approaches. There may be some gems, but really, it's just another old, dead white person's view of what education should be. I'm truly fed up with that system too. More creative, more innovative, but stuck in traditions of their time. Heteronormative views of family, society, what is work, plus racism, classism, privilege. But here's the caveat. I'm struggling with Steiner Waldorf. I love this, I dislike that, but I'm a Steinerite. This Friday, I'll be running my outdoor Steiner-inspired playgroup. I may argue it's held through a feminist, anti-colonial lens. I may say I'm aware of my privilege, white, middle-class, British woman who benefited from the system. Am I able to critique it? Reminders that I am living on stolen lands, settler, colonial academic, Drumble country, Australia. Moving on. Motivation, intrinsic motivation. What gives us flow? To love, to learn with passion and play. Democratic schools let the kids choose if they want to go to class. Peter Gray argues that it is the future. In democratic schools, everyone has a say. Young children to adults are equals. But are they? Power haunts consensus decisions. Those with loudest voices get their own way. This democracy is not my future. Alarm bells ring. What about well-being, inclusion, and saying no? I'm inspired by young people-led learning, but in action I often saw textbooks and uninspiring teaching going on, except for schools using sociocracy. That was eye-opening. Yet I'm fed up with this system too. It is still a school, back to that neoliberal machine. What about unschooling then? Perhaps community project-based unschooling, sharing ideas of thinking differently about society, inclusive of gender, sexuality, ability, language, paying respects to Indigenous knowledges, respecting others, embodied awareness of histories and stakes, awareness of climate change, activist, loving. For it is an entanglement of education, a radical non-binary approach that draws on the current strengths, the gems, but the dreams for the future, for the visions of the not yet thought, made possible by giving young people the freedom to fly and to de-school teachers and de-school the system and chuck out not just the word school, but the institution itself. For there is no ideal school. A school is not the answer. So
Thank you so much.
basically that's my work. Yeah, that school is not the answer. How we have it at the moment, even these innovative schools, it's still a school.
That raises many questions, right? That raises many questions.
Yeah, go for it.
Not only the school, but about the system itself, right? This year in Documenta, we have a very big shift in the structure of how the event is run. A collective has been invited to curate the exhibitions, and this collective has invited more collectives that have more collectives in their structure. So it's been very interesting how community and how collaboration and how exchange, peer-to-peer exchange, we can see in every exhibition here. And that's why we are running this post-institutional cafe here, And we are trying to foresee the post-institutional era. So how can we go beyond institutions? And as you say, as school is not the answer, how can we overcome these very tight structure of a school and maybe imagine, a different future that we don't know yet, of course. and the journey that you have been through, I think is it has a lot of information and is very enriching for the post-institutional concept and for the post-institutional idea of how can we have learning experiences beyond institutions and beyond the traditional roles, spaces, methods that have been happening for centuries. I don't know if you have a take on that.
No, that's a good question.
So
yeah, so I think that that's such an important question, is what can we do? And when I was doing my research, I often had a lot of people asking, well, what can I do? So I put forward the idea that people could become school tourists. So the more experience that more people in society know about how to educate differently, then we can start thinking differently. So if somebody is training to be a teacher and they visit different innovative practices, then they can maybe start bringing that into their classroom. Or a parent can say, oh, maybe I could send my child to this school rather than that school, or do this enrichment at home. Or a young person can say, hey, the system isn't right for me, there's something else out there. This is still tiny though. This is still within the neoliberal understanding of what is education, that we must take exams and this is success. And that isn't enough for me. So it's very interesting. When I did my research, I was not a mother and not a parent. I was hoping to be. So I wrote my book in many different voices of Alys. So it's the idea of a discussion with different voices of who I am. And one of them was the future parent. But now I'm living this life with a child. And so I'm making those decisions as we go along with my partner and I. We're together, very much a team. And it's difficult when you choose to not do things that society is doing with your child. So it's when you have very strong beliefs that you've researched and thought about, it's harder to find friends and it's harder to create that society. So, but it makes it even more important, I think, from what you're saying about the post-institutional Café concept of collective change. So if you get groups of people to make that change, you can support each other. So I'm hoping, well, we're in Australia at the moment. We're hoping to move back to UK later on in the year. So hoping to find them more networks. Yeah.
So you said there's no school is not the answer, but so you have seen so many schools. Which one you found was like coming close
to be an answer.
Yeah.
So I suppose what I'm arguing is that can't exist. It doesn't. Every time I go somewhere, I look at it through the lens of the things that I don't like. And I've got a long list of things that I don't want in education. And when I go there and see them, I struggle with it. But I am saying that I am trained, although I'm trained as a mainstream UK teacher, I'm also trained in Waldorf, in Steiner Waldorf education. So I like beauty. I like a lot of the magic, but I don't like single age classes. I don't like set curriculums. And I don't like anything that's connected to old stories of racism and not looking at the world in an inclusive way. So it's hard to get to feel empowered by a pedagogy that's over 100 years old that I do not think meets where we are now. So even though I love democratic idea in education and the concept of intrinsic motivation for learners, I wasn't struggle deeply with the meetings and the fact that so many rules are made by this community. So to me, you get elements of what I call gems. There would be gems in different approaches, but they don't all put together to make an ideal school because they're all from a different time, place, and culture. And I'm very aware that most of the schools I went to were English-speaking schools, or I had a guide to translate for me. So I'm only getting a very narrow flavor of what is available at the moment, but it's still within our current world of what is seen to be success. So that's why I'm into this space of this consciousness shift, this paradigm shift, imagining differently into this not yet thought space. If we could live in a world where you don't need to get A grades, you don't need to be passing exams to feel that you're a success. So it's looking at success in different ways, and maybe different word even to success. It's very hard because I'm saying this from somebody who did well at school and has got lots of pieces of paper and has a PhD. So you're saying that somebody to, but at the same time, I dance around the edges. I don't, as a teacher, I worked a very short time before I said I retired in that piece. And then I worked as a supply teacher. I went into schools for a short term, and even as an academic.
You're breaking up. Oops. Got it. I know he's there. She's
I'm
there.
back.
Oh,
I'm
you're
back. I'm not sure. I disappeared.
Nice to have you back. Technology.
I see myself as an edge dweller, and I think that's it. Somebody who dances in and out at the edges of society, trying to make those changes. I know some people make changes within their schools, but that wasn't for me. I want to be part of people, getting people to think differently at the edge. Yeah, so
sorry, please go on.
No, go for it. Okay.
There is now I'm thinking about your journey and your trip and the things that you're saying, and it seems that the educational systems are actually changing around the world. They are like some of them are getting better, some of them are not, and we have references, like in the press, and we have references in publications about countries like Finland, for example, that have been innovating in their educational systems and taking new concepts there. And everybody looks at Finland as a reference, right? As a success story, let's say. Did your journey include a visit to the Finnish educational system, or can you tell us your opinion about that?
Yeah, I was very lucky to I went to the International Democratic Education Conference in Finland in 2016. And so I visited a school there, and I stayed with some primary school teachers. And what's great about Finland is that the focus on not having to do high stakes testing until the very end. There's much more focus on making sure respect for teachers, they're masters qualified. But then at the same time, it was interesting to speak to teachers about how hard it was to become a teacher and how hard it was to live outside the system. So if there's no fee-paying schools, you're all in the same system, then you haven't got the choice to do things differently. Although that obviously choice is a very neoliberal concept, I still believe that there's that freedom to do things differently. And I don't necessarily support how the state is educating in single age classes and organizing what the curriculum should be. So that's the challenge of, I'm still coming from a space of privilege, as most children need to go to school in the current world. There's only certain ones that can choose to home educate or to do things differently. So in terms of compared to other schools, there's a lot of strengths to the Finnish system, but it wasn't what I was looking for, because it was still a state governed and controlled institution. And we're looking at this post-institutional Café. It's still another institution. And I still question single age big classes as that being expected to be the norm and to be your friends. There's a lot of, in terms of mental health and well-being of young people, there's a lot of things that go on in school that aren't great fun. People, when you think about your memories of childhood in school.
Okay, so this is a very, we could even think about making a movie about this, because it's so exciting, the idea of traveling the world visiting these schools and trying to find, it's like looking for a treasure, right? And then realizing that there's actually no treasure to look for.
Yeah, it was really
So
upsetting. Yeah.
was it?
Yeah, I went to I put certain schools on pedestals. There's a very famous international school called the Green School in Bali, and I was very excited to be able to go there for a week. And I was on the educators course, so I'd paid quite a lot of money to be there, and it's a long way to travel. And it's got beautiful buildings built out of bamboo, really great ethos on sustainability. But then I realized how much privilege there was there. And actually, you could have beautiful buildings, but it didn't necessarily mean you had innovative teaching all the way through, or there were sort of, it felt a bit tokenistic, the relationship with the local Balinese. And I knew about how the wages weren't fair. And I just started feeling uncomfortable with the system. And I wrote a poem that's in my book in my PhD, where I suddenly, people started saying to me, why are you always fed up all the time? Why are you so upset with everything? It's great. And I realized it wasn't great, because it actually, there wasn't this goal that I was looking for. It was much bigger, but also much more exciting, because actually, why am I fighting over these tiny little details of what makes an ideal school, when actually we need to think in a much bigger level, a much meta level of chuck it all away. We need to shift society. We need to think differently, rather than pushing the sort of the egos of these different schools.
Do you think it's a matter of the school only, or is it a matter of institutions in general, or is it a systemic thing that might be the cause of not finding this dream school? But because we can think about, the specific element of the school, like, yes, we have, there's always a system behind, right? There's always an ecosystem, and there's more things related. So how do you think that these not finding the school relates to other aspects of society, like policy or governance or culture or economics, or how do you think that might be the result of our decisions in society, or our ways in society?
Good question. It's totally systemic. It's historic. It's part of our culture. It's in the UK. It was from 1870, when they had compulsory primary education. It was to get the new workers. It's part of society's way. You get them through the primary schools. They learn how to do as they're told. You train them up, then they're going to work in the factories. It's this system. And even when I ran an ideal school project with some teenagers at a school in Switzerland, and I told them they could design a school that could be anything they wanted. And one group, most of them were quite like their own schools. They weren't that brave. And one group was quite brave and had a lot of outdoor learning. But then they suddenly said, hang on, but if we don't take exams, we won't be able to go to university, and we won't be able to succeed. So it was very hard, even when you've got freedom to think differently, that people don't necessarily have the skills to think differently, because they haven't had the chance to know what else was possible. So yeah, I think it's a really tricky space, but I also think that's quite exciting. I talked about something which I called the Earth We. So I write about the Alys We, so that's all the parts of me that are on this journey. But the Earth We is this greater consciousness of shift that we could be part of. And I think we need to be part of that post-institutional space. Yeah, go for it. Sorry.
So in this journey, I guess that you found many examples, and I know they are in the book, and we would like to go a little deeper into the stories you share in the book. But just we have like 7 minutes more, and I would really like you to share, at least, like you did before, two examples about schools that you found particular or that you found, let's say, special in a good way or in a, because they make you, like happy or very sad, like those that make you feel good or bad, which are the ups and downs of this journey.
That sounds great. Well, in 2017, I joined a colleague with three or four pre-service teachers in New York, and we had a week of group school tourism. So normally I visited schools on my own, but this was with three pre-service teachers and their professor. They're from Texas, and they were in New York for the first time visiting schools. And that was exciting because each day we went to different, well, maybe one or two different schools. And I think I'll keep on the theme of democratic education because I'm fascinated by this concept of students choosing what they're learning and how they're learning it. But alongside that coming these whole school meetings where rules are decided and all sorts of things are going on in the school happen. And most examples of the places that I visited are down to, they vote on it, and it's the loudest voice wins, basically, of what's going to happen. But I'm particularly, as you can tell, also invested in sort of the feminist social justice agenda. And there was one school in Brooklyn, which was very, very inclusive. And you could see that the whole curriculum approached this, even though it was students were in charge of the learning, the ethos of the school critiqued everything, making sure that there were much more inclusive voices all the way through. From posters, posters supporting LGBTQI students to including Black voices, to educating white people to be more inclusive. It was very interesting how the whole school ethos was about change. So that was really good. We also went to one school, which was a middle school that was funded. So what was it? It was a school for people of good character. I think that's how they put it. But basically from low socioeconomic areas of good character. And the head teacher told me, he said, you look no further. You have found the ideal school. It's the worst school I went to in all the schools I went to visit. It was quite horrific. The students were in rows. And then I actually had to leave. The head teacher started being very condescending. And I said, I'm sorry, I can't spend any more time here. So I was sitting in the reception area of this school whilst some of my other colleagues were talking around the school, and I overheard them making a teenage girl ring up her mum to say, I'm sorry, I lied to my teacher in front of everyone in the whole reception of the school. So you get some examples where places that feel that they are transformational and they've told me they're the ideal school and they're definitely not. I write a poem about that in my book as well, but yeah, so it was quite horrific. So you can get these extremes where somebody's adamant you've found the ideal school, and I know for me that it's definitely not ideal. And then you've got other schools where you can tell the whole ethos is about societal change and that consciousness shift. So within 2 blocks of each other. I think one other school that's worth mentioning is a school called De Ruimte, which is in the Netherlands, and it's a democratic school, but it uses sociocracy, which is what I mentioned in my piece before as well. So instead of all the students putting their hand up and the highest number of votes wins, it's all about consent. So when you actually have a meeting and you discuss, it's actually, do you care about this enough to enter this discussion? And at the end, it's a successful outcome. So for everybody, rather than half the people, well, 6 people happy and 4 people are not happy. So it felt that, and they also, what I felt often happens in democratic schools is when you decide to learn, there isn't necessarily creative pedagogy. You can go to some amazing places which are into project-based learning where they've got really innovative teaching. Whereas a lot of the democratic schools, they just ended up with textbooks, and that seemed very strange. Whereas this particular school in the Netherlands, they were so, I thought they got it. For one example, was they looked at the primary curriculum in maths, and they said, you know what, you can do 6 years of maths learning in 3 months. So when a student wanted to learn maths, they could go to the teacher and say, yes, I commit to having 3 classes a week with a bit of homework that I'm in charge of, so totally in charge of it, and they could do 6 years of learning in 3 months. because when you're ready, you can do it. And it really started questioning all that wasted time in school in terms of, you know, which you could say is part of school, but on the other hand, it was actually when someone wants to learn and they're committed, they could do it, rather than all the difficulties within traditional educational spaces.
Okay.
Yeah, that brings us back to Kassel, to Documenta, because as you said, one Grupa from Jakarta, that was exactly, or was their practice consensus, you know? And they said, yeah, that's difficult, takes a lot of time and this discussion, but they tried that out, and even they tried it out with this, organizing this exhibition. I have no insights of the, you know, backstage, what really happened, because that's maybe another story, also through the pandemic. And the way they created this shows also, like, all these, also many of these groups who are here now, you know, work with consensus and try to integrate as much as people they can. So it's kind of our final round here.
And
Oh, that's cool.
I have a last maybe comment or something that I would like to share is there has been, especially in the United States, but in some other countries of the world, the phenomenon of the school shootings, right? And we are really aware that it has to do with, of course, gun access in the U.S. and the freedom to buy guns. But it's probably not only that, right? Is the place where it happens, the way that it happens, and why they happen is like one of the big questions. I've been thinking about this because it's been happening for years now, since Columbine, that was, you know, like worldwide spread, and we still have this, and everybody thinks about gun access, but what makes the young people and even children think about going into your own school and shooting everyone? So this is a big question, and I don't know if around across the journey that you have, were you to see, especially because you mentioned Texas, that came to my mind. Did you detect any trigger or any causes or any special drivers that could make young people? And is it the school, or is it society, or is it actually just gun access? Just to ask you, you know, like your personal point of view.
Wow, that's a very, very difficult question.
I know.
With no experience of the, it's just a tragic place, and it's very culturally abnormal to somebody from the UK or from living in Australia. When I've been to the States, it felt strange to go into universities and schools and having to X-ray machines to go in to visit schools. Like, culturally, it's a very, very different environment. But I think it's a systemic thing about not meeting young people's needs, and I'd say pushing, society not supporting families and not respecting, well, a lot of it is Black voices and Black lives and lack of respect. So there's a lot of societal change that needs to happen there, and that maybe that's it. It's even bigger. It's much bigger than my dreams about educational change. It needs this big societal shift.
Yeah, the thing is, I ask this because the kid has the gun, right? And it could happen at the shopping mall. It could happen on the street. It could happen in Main Street, but it happens at school, so it becomes a battlefield. And I feel there is something going on also with the place, the location they pick to do this. And I know it's a tragic thing, but willing to understand just why it happens at school and not at the basketball field or a shopping mall or anywhere else. Just that. Didn't want to leave this with a low note. so but that was, a recurring question I have. And you being around the world, that you were the right person to ask this. So thank you so much for being with us today. It's been very, very, very exciting to hear the stories and to hear this approach, and also to have these I would say radical position about there's no school, there's no good school. We need to go further. We need to be more radical into a more innovative or more, let's say, daring into changing our ways and teaching. Thank you so much, Alys. And I don't know if you want to have a few words for her.
So have a good, is it evening or did I get it right? Night, yeah, oh yeah, have a good. All the best for your family, and I'm curious, like, to what kind of school you will bring your child.
We're planning to home educate, so that's the plan. We shall watch this space.
Thank you so much, Alys, and thanks for your time. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.